Hey guys, in this video we'll continue with where we left off with the chat application. Now we have to design the intersection, and here are some of the designs that I basically had previously as well. So let's just figure out what we're going to do. I think a center channel like this looks better. So let's just go ahead and actually do that first, and then I think let's just have a sidebar similar to this where the image is shown larger. We have some details on the right, and yeah, so let's just try it out. So the first thing we need obviously is a title. As we can see here, apart from the title, we have some minor maybe description, and then we have some messages. So let's just go ahead and actually add that in. So I'm going to basically again say, I'm just going to add this name, Florence, and I'm going to give it a, let's see what font. We were using the Metropolis font. So I'm going to go ahead and use the Metropolis font here as well. I'm just basically going to copy these styles and paste them here. 24. We also probably need an image at the top. Like usually these guys don't have images, but I want to add an image at the top as well. I'm going to create a container here, and the container is basically going to occupy this whole screen, probably till here, maybe just slightly small because we want the sidebar as well. I'm going to give it a white background. I'm just going to move it at the bottom. I'm also going to give a shadow to this particular container, or maybe apart from a shadow, we're just going to give a right border. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to click the plus icon. Now we have a shadow. I'm going to say the blur is going to be 0, the Y is going to be 0, and the X is going to be -1. And when it's 1, like obviously as you can see, the border appears on the right, and we can then slightly make the opacity lighter to make the border lighter. I think this looks good. Now let's just go ahead and copy Florencio's image. I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to paste it here. Gonna make both of these an auto layout. So there it is. And let's just actually pin this whole thing at the top. I'm going to say there's going to be a 24 pixel spacing here. And then we can basically go ahead and expand this whole thing. In order to expand it, like first of all, I'll just go ahead and make it an auto layout. I'll make this thing in auto layout. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to again note this width. It's 643. Let's just go ahead and actually now expand the height and fill it, maybe make it 640. So this section is going to be 640. Let's just go ahead and actually center this content, give some spacing in between them. I think the title can actually be reduced to 20. This image probably is fine, maybe 16 pixel spacing in between them, and let's just go ahead and actually expand the header. So we have this content here, and there's one thing that we can do. We can actually reduce the size of this content so it actually comes on the same line as this one. Also, I notice a spelling mistake here, so I'm going to copy. Basically, let's see what the height for this particular thing is. It's 81, so I probably want it to be 80. Well, it is 80 sort of, because we have a border at the bottom. So let's just go ahead and actually give a border here as well. So I'm going to say there's going to be a border. I'm going to basically make this auto layout not have a spacing in between them. And here we have the border. I'm going to expand the border and basically say that this is going to be manually. I'm manually going to resize it to 80, because then we don't need to worry about the top and bottom padding. We can also make it 0, or we can give it and then it wouldn't be respected. So basically we have this now. Let's just open it in the new window and let's see how this looks. I can also make the image slightly smaller in this case, because I think I just want to give more white space here. So I think this looks good. One other thing I can actually add below the Florencio is I can add the online indicator. So I can say online, and maybe we can have another auto layout here. I'm just going to add a circle, and I'm going to give it a green maybe of, let's say, 400, just to indicate that this person is online. Then again center it, and then I notice that I'm not concerned about like things going out of the window, because I know that when I actually reduced the font size of everything, like it's obviously going to automatically work or organize itself. So I'm again going to do that, and let's just go ahead and actually, instead of, let's say, a reduced opacity, let's just give it that. And then also obviously reduce the spacing in between these elements, also remove the padding. I think the spacing should obviously be further reduced. So now it is reduced. I think this can actually be reduced in opacity. So I just made it 60. this circle can actually be in multiples of 4. So I'll just make it 8, or maybe we can even make it 12. So 12 pixel width and 12 pixel height. I think this is probably fine. We can make this 24. Also, probably reduce the spacing in between the circle and the online. Never mind, I think this is looking big, so I'm just going to go ahead and reduce the size, make this 12. And also I'm going to go on this H3 and I'm going to reduce the line height. So instead of 150%, I'm going to make it 125%. So I think this looks good now. We can probably even have a call button here. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually drag all of these. This is going to be our user content, and this is going to be the header, message or message header, or panel header maybe. Let's just go ahead and give it that. And now maybe have a call icon here. So I'm going to search for a call icon with one of the icons that I have, or I can basically just go ahead, as I've already mentioned, I can use the font awesome set that I have. I'm going to use the font awesome. So here I have an icon. Let's just go ahead and actually give it regular, increase the size to 16, and instead say call. So let me just go ahead and change that call and probably center it. Also, we can probably reduce the size of it as well and reduce the spacing in between these items to maybe 8. Let's just see how that looks. I think this looks fine. This is going to be our call button. And let's just give this whole button some spacing. I'm going to give it an 8 pixel spacing, a border radius of 8 as well. And maybe give this a primary color. And also going to just go ahead and reduce the opacity of this to maybe 10. So I think this looks fine, though obviously the spacing on the left and the right can be increased. And here we have the call button, and I think this looks good. I need to position this on the left and this on the right, so I'm just going to go ahead and give it auto. You can also obviously go and choose the space between. So we have the call button there, and let's just see how the solid icon looks and whether that looks better. I think the call icon, the solid icon looks better. And I can also search for a phone icon in, let's say, some of the other libraries. I can go to Iconly and search for a phone. So Iconly also has a bunch of good items. So if I search for call, they have these items, and there are light icons as well, broken icons as well. So if I actually just use this one, I think this one may look better. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just reduce it, just to show you guys that you can use some other icons as well. I think the top spacing can actually be increased as well. So I'm going to increase it 10 and make it 10. So here we have the user, and let's just go ahead and actually add some messages now. So this is going to be our header, which is already defined. And then I'm basically going to go ahead and actually add my own self. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a message box here. I'm basically going to go ahead and actually say that this is going to be an auto layout. Sorry, not this, but basically we're going to have an auto layout around this whole thing, which is going to be our messages container. So this would be our messages container. I'm going to give a 16 pixel spacing around everything here. I'm going to say this is going to be and we can actually just see if we can reuse some of this message component. And let's just go ahead and take inspiration how others are doing it. So they have a avatar, they have some messages, then they have an avatar, and they have messages on the right. So obviously your own messages would appear on the right instead of the left. So I think Florence needs to be here instead of there. So Florence is here, and let's just go ahead and actually create the message container. So message content goes here, and then create an auto layout here, and let's use a light text probably on the left because it indicates the other user's message, and also give it a border radius of 12. Let's just reduce this font size, also make it regular. So I think this message content looks good. Also give some spacing on the left and the right. So 8 minus 16 should be fine. And this is, I'm just going to make this a component. So this is going to be our message item. So here we have the message item. And since I need multiple of these messages item in this thing, so I'm just going to go and I'm going to replicate them. So I'm going to have 4 of them, and I'm just going to basically grab the original message component here. And this is going to be other user. I'm going to create like variants for this. So one is going to be for the other user, and this bottom one can be for my own. And let's just go ahead and actually change that to the primary color that we have and change the text to white. And I can also use the white coming from my library. So here we have some messages. So the user is going to send some messages. Let's just go ahead and actually reduce the size of the image here as well. Or we can keep it consistent just to be consistent with the top header here. Well, actually, we can obviously make it consistent. We can say it's going to be 40. The spacing on the left and the right should also be consistent. So obviously these things can be aligned. As you can see, they are aligned now. So that looks much better. And then we can basically say that these are going to be an auto layout. So here we have these messages. I'm going to go to my content reel. And even before going to the content reel, let's just go ahead and actually create my own messages as well. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say this is going to span to the top and the bottom. I'm going to give some spacing in between these messages, maybe even 32, just to add some break in between them. And then in this case, the user name is going to be on the right because those are going to be my messages. I'm going to move everything on the right and going to make it a fill container just so it actually encapsulates the whole row. So here are the other users' messages. Here are my messages. I'm going to go ahead and say I'm just going to message the user once. So in this case, I'm going to say these are going to be my own messages, and then maybe the other user sends me 2 messages, and then I'm basically going to duplicate this thing, and I'm going to send him, let's say, 2 messages or maybe 3 messages. So here I have some messages, and let's just go ahead and actually select all of these to auto generate some content in them. So I'm going to go to content reel. I'm going to go to message, and I'm basically going to say apply to all. So this message looks big. Obviously, I don't want so long messages. So I'm just going to search the content reel plugin for some smaller messages. And let's see if these work. I think these should probably work. So apply all. Yep, I think this looks good. And let's just try. Or maybe I think these are fine. I don't want to go ahead and ponder on this too much. I'm going to move this to the right. So the auto layout is on the right. I think this definitely does look good. One thing that I want to actually do is instead of having this purple, let's just actually make it gray, because I don't want these people to think that these are tappable, though they can be once we add, let's say, extra functionality. So we have that, and let's just now go ahead and actually create a message input box at the bottom. So in order to do so, I'm basically just going to copy this search messages input that I have here, or maybe this whole thing, this header. I'm going to copy this header. I'm going to paste it here. And as you can see, we have this. I'm also going to make this a hug content, just so everything at the top is actually at the top. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to select the border that we have on the left, and this is going to be our message list. So let me just go ahead and actually combine all of them. And I'm going to say this is going to be our top content, and this is going to be our message box, and then this is going to be the message panel. In this message panel, what we're going to do, we're obviously going to go ahead and do a space between again, so everything at the bottom moves at the bottom. So now that it's at the bottom, let's just go ahead and actually give a 24 pixel spacing all around. Now we want to add some icons. Maybe let's see what other people are doing. So they have a send button, they have an attachment button, attachment and send, and then attachment and a bunch of other icons. So I think the attachment is a constant. So let's just go ahead and actually add the attachment button. I also want to do a border here instead of a background. So I'm going to go to my stroke. I'm going to select, let's say, gray minus 300. I'm going to give a 2 pixel stroke, and I'm going to remove the background or make it white. So here I'm going to say type a message. We're going to remove this icon. Actually, I'm going to move this icon to the right and going to say this is going to be auto. And instead of this search, I'm going to say it's going to be a paper plane. And the paper plane can be solid. That's obviously going to be used for sending the user the message. I'm going to remove the opacity. And here we have some content. Actually, we can make this button even larger. And apart from that, let's just add a attachment icon on the left. So one thing, I obviously want this to be actually spaced accordingly. So I'm going to say this is going to be a fill container. And This thing can actually be a hug content. This also can be a hug content. Everything needs to be center aligned. This actually instead of, let's say, being fixed width, I'm going to say this is going to be a fill container. We're going to say attach. We don't have anything named attach. I think it's file, or maybe paper minus clip, paper clip. Okay, it is a paper clip icon. And then for the input, let's just make it manually larger. I'm going to say this is going to be 48. So now this is 48. Let's just see how that looks. I think this looks fine. I also need to give some more spacing in between these items. So I'm going to say 24. And this by default, maybe instead of being purple, this can actually be gray and slightly dimmed. So maybe 40 opacity. And let's see if we actually have an alternate for that. Well, maybe we do, but I think this should probably do for now. So we have some messages and we can actually just go ahead. I think this looks empty, so I can actually just go ahead and add 3 more messages here. I'm going to go to my content reel plugin and I'm going to search for messages. And here we have some chat messages. I'm going to basically again star these as well so I can access them directly from here. I'm going to select these and I'm going to say apply all, or maybe just apply all again. One more time. Okay, so this looks good. I also want to add some emojis in there because I think the emojis look good. So we have the woohoo, and then maybe we can add a clock here, or maybe a colorful clock, just to make it look a bit better. And then in the perfect, let's just say a check. Okay, so obviously with the icons, like, it just provides a lot of contrast and it looks good, which is why I did it. So here we have this center panel done. Let's just go ahead and actually create another panel. And in this panel, we're just going to have maybe a team library. So again, going to give this, I'm basically just going to go to this message panel, basically copy it, and then paste the styles here. So you can copy the styles by going to the edit and say copy properties, and then you can go here and say paste properties. So I already have shortcuts applied, so I don't need to do that manually. One other thing that we can do is, since all of these can actually now be an auto layout container within itself as well, we can go ahead and we can say that this whole desktop frame actually is an auto layout. So I added an auto layout automatically. And now that we have that done, we can actually just go ahead and, first of all, what we can do is we can say this is going to be fixed width and this is going to be fixed height. And then now if you can actually see, if I'm actually reducing the size of it, it's automatically adjusting. And I can now move the border left and right if I want quite easily. I don't have to actually configure it. I don't have to add a border read, a box shadow for that. I can actually just go ahead and use a black border and say it's going to be an 8 pixel opacity. And I can say this can actually be fill container, so it's automatically going to occupy the space. I'm going to basically go to my messages header here, and I'm going to say that this is actually going to be here as well. And in this particular element, let's just go ahead and actually make it an auto layout as well and say that this is going to have a fixed height. The reason I make things auto layout is so we can actually make it responsive, and I can actually use the auto layout properties here as well. So now we have the header and we have this header as well. So I'm just basically just going to expand it. I'm going to say team library, or maybe say team members. I'm going to change this to 8, and maybe a plus icon here makes sense as well. Or maybe not a plus icon, maybe an ellipsis minus h minus h minus v. Yeah, so maybe an ellipsis here probably makes more sense. And instead of this being slightly darker, let's just go ahead and actually detach it. And one thing I can do, I can actually go to my and create a style. So this is going to be primary 10%, and I'm going to go here as well, and I'm going to say this is going to actually be primary 10%, and the icon inside can actually be primary in color. So that's done, and I think this probably looks good, though in this case I don't think we need a shadow, so I'm going to remove that shadow. One thing, as you can see, the border isn't occupying the space of the container, so I'm going to say fill container. And now here, what we basically just want to do, we can actually go ahead and just copy this message box or this component that I created and just paste it here as well. So if I paste it here, I can actually go ahead and I can say that these labels, so this message component, I'm going to go to the message component. I'm going to say that there's going to be another variation for this message component, and we're not going to have any labels here, and we're not going to have a time here. We're basically just going to have the full name and a job description here. So I'm going to enter. I'm also going to rename it. So basically in this state 3, one thing I actually have to note, I need to add a new property. This is going to be a type. So we're going to say the default type is going to be the message, and this particular type can actually be a team member. I'm just doing things quickly, so you don't have to worry about it. And now that we have that, let's just go ahead and actually copy all of these members from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's just go and actually, instead of, let's say, copying them manually, why don't we just go ahead and actually delete this whole thing, go to our header and actually just paste it here. So now let's just go ahead and actually select all of these by going to the parent and pressing enter. That way all of the inner elements are selected, and maybe just change that to team members. And here we have basically all of the team members. I'm going to go to my images, and instead of, let's say, using the same members, why don't I go ahead and actually apply some other images. So now some other images should be there. Let's just go ahead and actually change the names here as well. I'm going to go to my full name mail. I'm just going to go ahead and rename them, and going to go to the job and then basically select a job positions. So here we have our team members 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's just maybe call them 6. Obviously you can add as many as you want. What other content can we actually add on the right hand sidebar? So we have team members, and we can actually have some tasks as well. We can have files as well. So I think this is probably fine. So why don't we just go ahead and actually say this is going to be our directory, and the directory is not going to have any header, but inside of that directory we're going to have basically, or actually inside here, we're going to say we're going to have some team members heading, and then this team members heading is going to basically have this label, and it's going to be like this. Just move it on the right center. Also probably going to use the same font size here, and let's just go ahead and actually move it at the top. So here we have our team members, and let's just see how that looks. I think this looks good. Obviously the spacing at the top is very less, so we need to increase that. So first of all, I'm just going to go and say that the spacing in between sections can actually be 24 pixels. So now it looks good. So this is going to be our team members section. That's section 1, and then we're going to have a files section, and let's just go ahead and actually change the team members to 6 just to be reflective, and then files maybe 125. And now we want to add some file icons. So maybe for the file icon we just need an icon, we need a title, and then we need a size and a and something basically. So let's just go ahead and actually do that. So in order to add an image or a file component, and one thing that actually needed to be done here was, this is going to be our section title, and we need to make this a component because it is being reused. So I'm going to change that to title, and I'm going to change this text to number. And this is really important because when you change variants, which is something that we don't have right now, it does mess it up if this text name here isn't unique. So now that that's done, let's just go ahead and actually add a border here as well. I'm going to add a border. I'm going to say the height is going to be 1 pixel. I'm going to reduce the opacity. Actually, we can use the same border style that we have here, copy it, paste it here. And let's just see how that looks. So I think this looks fine. Now for the files, I want to have the same. I'm basically going to detach this component. I'm going to say that this fill is not going to be there. We're instead going to have a fill like this, and actually we were going to have this fill, and we're going to have a file name, a file icon in there. So let's just go ahead and see add maybe an icon from Font Awesome. So I'm going to copy an icon that I've already placed here. I'm going to paste it here, center it. Actually, I can make this an auto layout and then center it manually. So I've done that too. And let's just actually make it a fixed height, fixed width, and a fixed height, and say file minus PDF maybe. Make it light, probably increase the font size and make it red, because usually I think the PDF icons are red. So let's just go ahead and actually do that. And instead of, let's say, this light purple color, why don't we just make it like something like this? So this is going to be our file name, and I'm going to say this is going to be our title on the left. This particular thing can actually be first of all, this can actually be in an auto layout. These are going to be the meta details of the file, and the meta details are going to contain, let's say, the file type, which is going to be the PDF. I'm going to change that to type, and this is going to be the size, which I'm going to change to 8 MB or 9 MB or whatever. So I think this looks good. One other thing that I would like to add, hopefully in this, would actually be a download button. So I'm just going to copy this icon. I actually should have made this an icon component, so I'm going to change this to an icon button. I'm basically going to copy it and then going to paste it here or on the far right, and then we can say download. So now that it's download, I actually need to modify the component itself. First of all, I'm going to say this is going to be an auto layout. Again, this is going to be fixed height, fixed width. It's going to be centered, and there's not going to be any padding. So now this should also be centered, and I think we can make this light just for the download to happen, or the light probably isn't even that visible, so I'm going to make it regular. So I think this looks good, though I think the icon here and in other places can actually be larger, so I'm going to make it 40. And here, as you can see, this should always be 48. So I'm going to say this is going to be fixed height, and we're going to make it 80. So I think now this looks good. I think since we've actually changed this icon button here, we should actually change it here as well. Just a second, I think someone's at the door. Okay, so this should actually be 40 instead here as well. For some reason, I don't like the 40 because I think it looks quite large. Maybe it's okay. Maybe we can let it pass, just with the consideration that this video is getting really long. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to say this is going to be our file card, and I'm going to make it a component. And then basically we're going to go ahead and remove these team members. Just going to go to remove them and actually add some other files here. And then basically actually change this to file minus image, change this to file minus PNG, or file minus what, a Word maybe, and this to file minus Excel. So here we have it. Let's just go ahead and actually change Excel to maybe purple. So I'm going to say this is going to be purple, and this can actually be purple 500 as well. This Word thing can actually be blue, so let's just change that to blue 100, and this can be blue 500. So again, these colors are coming from Tailwind, so if you want, you can actually download the free Tailwind library and actually include it in your project, and that way you're going to get it. For the image, let's just make that green, and this can actually be green 500. So again, being very consistent, and now we need to update the file size. Maybe we make this 4 MB, and actually I think there shouldn't be any space here, so 4 MB, then 555 KB, and maybe 24 MB. PDF, PNG, doc, and then this can be Excel or XXL or whatever it is basically. And then for the file names, I think we can probably find a content reel plugin for that, or content reel entry for that as well. So let's just go ahead and file names, search for file names, and hopefully something is going to appear. If not, I'm just going to do that manually. So we have some file names, and I'm just going to go ahead. I think these file names look really crappy. Why don't we just go ahead and use these? Okay, So I think this looks good. So let's just change that to PDF. This is going to be PNG. This screenshot can actually be, actually let me just copy the screenshot here, and the share file dot docx here, and this can actually be XXL. So here we have the application done. I hope you guys really liked the video. Sorry, a few things here. So the first thing, as you can see, the drop shadows that I actually gave have disappeared, right? So there are no drop shadows. So that's one fallback of actually making this an auto layout. If you make it an auto layout, obviously the things on the left are on the left, and since they're actually at the bottom of this whole thing, you can't really see them overlapping this, because the items at the top are actually overlapping the items at the bottom, so you can see it. So we can actually go ahead and remove this auto layout now that we've configured everything, and actually move this sidebar above. And since I've moved it above, you should be able to see the drop shadow, and I can move this messages panel below the sidebar and just above these other elements, and as you can see it. So that's going to be pretty much it for this video. Do subscribe, do hit the bell icon, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.